Hi, I'm Seamless, and it's Wednesday, which means it's time for our new viewer track review video. And today we're going to start off with this track called Vitium by Absenxia. Absenxia. X's are weird in names, but you know, we all enjoy the hardcore nature, don't we? Anyway, let's hear what this sounds like. Don't lerp. Yeah, loop on. That was really cool. That was Vitium by Absenxia. Absenxia? Someone give me a pronunciation key for that. But this was awesome. I got a lot of decent Doom vibes from this. Mostly like just the palette kind of just felt that way. Like, I definitely feel you. You know, Doom Eternal's happening soon, and that's got me pumped beyond reason. I've been playing a lot more Doom 2016, And I'm doing a beta for a new Shreddage 3 instrument, and all I'm wanting to do is just that. So I feel you on that, and especially these kind of like little bits in there I liked a lot. I also dug overall the whole tone of the thing. Like the background and ambient elements were just awesome, and the instrumentation of it looked great. Like I'm not totally sure where did that moment go. Yes, thank you, Edison. I really clicking somewhere and then hitting play definitely means I want to play it in the beginning. That sounded an awful lot like time stretch brass. I have no idea if you did that way or not, but that's how I would do it, and that's pretty great. Like I dig the overall, like the texture on this track is super cool and unique. It's an interesting take on the air aspect, and honestly, I cannot wait for the day that sound design got like this in scoring, because this is really cool and just a better kind of like scene environment. Although, so since we're talking about scoring, we actually got to consider mixing a bit differently. You basically did it. Like, you did it. This is great. Like, I would not complain if I was, like, playing a game, I heard this, and I wanted to do it afterwards. But the whole idea of the fact that we can't make this as loud as a regular, like, EDM experience basically means that we're not going for loudness, we're going for clarity. And that means basically not over-compressing things. There was a moment, I think it's here. Yeah. All right. So here's a good example of when warm becomes mud. And like I seriously like pointed this out because I had a feeling, because it basically didn't happen before this, and it pretty much didn't happen again after this. And I'm mostly just showing this as an example of what I'm talking about whenever I bring up compression timing. This is that little warb that happens, right? Here's what happens before. And like, listen to it coming into it. That little moment before, I should have disabled scrolling. It was there. It was there. This bit, like, utterly unaffected by how heavy it is. And you can see the instant this new frequency came in, it got to be a bit much. So part of that is the chords you're using down there, and that's just going to happen. Like, the phase cancellation of low notes is slower enough that it turns into mud because it's at a frequency that's not a note. So that's just going to be the case, but that also just means that you want to be prepared for that and just not compress it as hard or as fast or slower. It could be faster that makes that better, depending on the tone you're going after, because again, faster makes it louder, A, and B, can distort it, and clean and clarity is our goal. There's a lot of ways I would have like to try to approach it, but honestly, the easiest one would be just be to turn down whatever this one element is, just so that it doesn't affect it like the level as hard in the threshold. And as well, certain songs, scores, tracks like this that have heavy moments will straight up just turn them up relative to the other guys, because if they're not going to be squashed to be a sausage, that means that the dynamic range actually has like a usable point. Which of course depends on application. Like if you're using this in like a scene or in a game or whatever, and chances are the person who makes that call isn't going to be you unless you're the one that's like on the game team. How often does that happen anymore? Anyway, dope track was dope. Good job with that. Moving on to the next track. This one is TOavn. Start. TOavn. TOavn. Oh boy. I feel like I'm getting more of a workout learning languages trying to pronounce people's artist names than I have ever actually learned a language. I too struggle with trying to figure out how to end tracks like this. In general, it is perfectly acceptable to do it as such. Like, if you're there for the groove and the beat, it isn't necessary to like have an actual like melodic musical exit. But yeah, so this was awesome. I like this a lot. I like the sound design was sweet. The mix of it was good. Like, I like the very selective use of actual sub underneath like unsubbed kind of like growly nonsense. Like, that's a pretty big challenge when it comes to doing this sort of thing, is balancing mid bass and sub bass. In old drum and bass, the methodology was mostly that they were different instruments, that there was a mid bass that just kind of flew around on top of what there was a sub bass that was there pretty much uninterrupted. And it wasn't really what's happening here, because there is some mid stuff, but mostly this is there for melodic purposes. And generally, you either do it like this, where it's just either not a sub or just like a really rumbly low presence, or you kind of guess where the sub's going to be, or you just make the sub the melodic element, and then the thing is forced to be with it or not. So it doesn't sound as good, in my opinion, as like when a thing is perfectly formed to a sub, but that's, of course, a different point, a different job. Generally speaking, this track was great. I think, let's look at something interesting. Like, for example, you see these like dark bits. That's either a result of sampling, which actually this kind of looks like, given how like on this is, that might be a thing, or of using like an MP3 or something like in this thing. How interesting. I wonder if that got pitched down to cause that result, or if it was an MP3. Because even if you do make a WAV file, if you use MP3s in your tracks, it's going to, have a result. And speaking of result, this is kind of interesting. We're using Harmer for that. That makes sense. It's an incredibly sharp cut up there. that is a Harmer thing to do. And I also like harmonically, I was looking at this wave, like, this is cool looking. Yeah. Isn't that fun? And I also liked how snappy it is, like that really snappy, the pitch envelope. Right, I basically like everything about this track. Of course, it's clipping kind of a lot. I wonder if, like last time, we can look at this and see. Yeah. All right. Okay. Wow, town. Alrighty. So let's talk about I mean, okay, that's just like, okay, inter-sample peaking is pretty much always what comes up. And this whole idea is that, like, it doesn't matter if the samples are at 0 dB, if there's content that goes between the samples that's above the samples. How the hell is that even possible? Well, digital sampling and the math that creates these points that we're looking at is actually pretty sophisticated, and it pretty well knows that for any given set of points that there is just the one given line, because of something called band limiting, where it knows that it can't generate a frequency above a certain point, so that there really is only a solution that can be these points and within that frequency. So when this happens, this is about, okay, well, a compressor is moving around these points, but there's still stuff in between the points. And what do you do about that? Because it can't compress between points. This is something that, like, analog compressors, actual hardware in general have over digital hardware, is that it doesn't matter the fact that the digital can compress things like perfectly in time and instantly, and without like the peaky clippy bits that are after it, because it's perfect. It can only do it 2 samples. So though, what do you do when you're in a sample rate that's not as much, and you don't want to go up to like a super incredible sample rate just to do this? Like, I guess you could render it and do it like that, or you can engage oversampling in whatever plugin you're using to do compression. Yeah, I wanted to do that without having to. Every time I try to do examples, I wonder if I minimize this a little bit, if it'll be devastating. Yeah, all right. So here's this. And inside Maximus, there's oversample. Turn it on. And that makes Maximus run at a higher sample rate so that it can detect where those points are and then change them. Like, detect the points between the points. Various compressors will have an option like this, or you can just up your sample rate. That's how you handle it. And that takes care of what it is referred to as inter-sample peaking. Because, obviously, I mean, we can saturate it. Like, you might be thinking, okay, well, what about distortion? What if you're going to do that with distortion? And it accounts for that. Distortion is the same. It really can only affect the sample points, and it does a good enough job doing that. But if you want the distortion to keep it at where it is, then you need to engage the higher sample rate resolution. And that's all there is to that, because otherwise it wouldn't peak. It would do this hard limit that you actually did intend to do, and then it would do it the way you wanted it to. And it'll actually sound like that on different systems. Like, that's sort of the point I made last time, is the idea that, sure, it can sound like a clipping for real, like just letting it go and clipping, but it won't sound great on another speaker, because every speaker will react differently to how it like perceives that damage, that like hard damage. Other than that, Dope Check was dope. That was honestly very little, because most people in situations probably wouldn't notice. Omen ahead, Deathwish. Okay, let's have a listen. That was really heavy. That was awesome. Pretty much all regards, I tend to like a thing. Everything I said about interstable peaking from the last track, this track. And also, okay, so this lead, this guy, I like him a lot. I like it a lot, and I didn't quite like it the very first time I heard it. This is a kind of rhythm that like doesn't make a lot of sense to me when I hear it. And then like the second time I hear it, I got, okay, it's a groove. And then the third time, it's in my head now, and now nothing else makes sense. That happened, so good job. At least it wasn't permanently awkward. It was a little, like this sort of switch up set is great. And I dig most of the time you do that. This beginning bit though, is too dark for how loud it is. Because this lead largely is pretty mid-light, especially when it comes down. Like that's how loud that other guy should have been. Is that loud and not like. Because that's like in your face. Okay, and that's a lot of in your face considering how much everything else is in your face too. And because damn clipping. And this last sound you had. Also, this fill was a pretty boss. This is like you can see that sound whap, 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 like be the loud thing when it comes up. That's kind of a lot. Although the kick is kicking quite hard, and the mix is quite well, pretty good on that. The sub articulation, that's not a word, is awesome. All right, this track is pretty well described as awesome. It fits that vibe quite well. I think it's burned up a bit too much when it comes to its distortion on the crunch. And actually, let's talk about, I bet you we can see this. Like, we talked about interstable peaking, but let's talk about something else about distortion and clipping. Like, when is clipping bad clipping? So, we like how Bernie things sound, obviously, and typically we hear these things spoken to us in terms of what's called harmonic excitement. And basically, I was like, what distortion is, it's additional higher frequency content from whatever fundamental source you're distorting. And it comes to basically, like, what exact frequency gets generated is about how much of it is in time distorted. So, like, for example, this little teensy little bit that Tim did a little tiny bit, like that would cause like just the tiniest, teensiest little high frequency. But this long bit that gets lengthway distorted, given that it is longer, it will be lower frequency. The more time it spends, essentially, it makes like this oscillation, like the frequency that will come out in the clip. And it is shown, the clipping, basically like if you did a kick and you high passed it at like 200 hertz or 1000 hertz, like this is kind of what that would sound like versus like, which is what this dudes sound like. And why they're generally okay is because they don't spend enough time up there. They're very fast, so it comes across as like a tinge, and it becomes more than a tinge when you spend more time above the clip. That's just it. That's all there is to that. And like you generally can survive doing that on elements that have that kind of length in them, like a kick or something, where like it'll have that thing happen, but it's doing that too. So it's just adding to what's already there. But like when a voice happens and it spends that much time up there and it clips like that hard, that's when it becomes bad clipping, in my opinion. Of course, if you thought this sounded dope, then by all means continue being dope, because I have heard way worse mixes on way bigger, stages. So obviously this is forward steam good. Forward steam good. What the hell? What? All right. The next track is Tearz with a Z, Fall Apart. Wee. Go to the beginning. Oh my God. Also pretty neat. Also clipping a lot. A lot of these tracks, I randomly selected these, and they all just ended up this way. You know, I obviously am a big proponent of saturating your master, so I you know, I can expect this, but, like, good lord, this is an MP3. Good lord. Yeah, so, that burned up kick feel is great when it comes to, like, this, like, almost hip-hop-y kind of texture, right? So, fun times. Like that. I like that hit a lot. What I was going to bring up, though, was, like, this sort of sub area. Like, this is very, like, re-sub, right? Because you can tell the harmonic and the harmonic and the harmonic. And you might have noticed the last track didn't have this harmonic in the middle. That's how you know that it's using the square series of the saw series. And this is just the saw series. It's just fine, because it sounds fine. But what I was going to bring up, though, is that the kick doesn't have its own kind of, like, terminated sub. And this is its only sub. And it is warbly. It warbles. Which is fine, I guess. Like, I say I guess because, like, I literally cannot detect, like, a real, official, actual problem with that. Other than that, it causes what I think, like, genre panic. Especially when we get this bit. I also think the lead kind of super saw thing. Oh, that's the hats. Okay, so I was trying to think of the thing that wasn't high enough frequency, because there's something that is a little too 2K, 1K up here, and not enough, like, 5K plus. And it probably might be the hats, because they're kind of dark. In fact, a lot of this stuff is dark, and it's a lot of why we can hear it crack up so much. With not as much high-frequency content on top of things, the distortion shines through like a beacon, which is good, you know, if that's what you want. But this is also kind of why white noise is on everything all the time. It's really there to hide this exact crunch up. Like, that was dirty. This whole track is dirty. And if dirty is your vibe, then you've won. Because it's also dope. It's a fine enough expression of what this is. And I'm hoping this is a whip. Just because this definitely felt like it was going somewhere. And even if it just came back into the chorus twice and then ended, that would have been a better ending than this. I assume this is a whip, although it is basically almost done, right? That's a songish length. It doesn't have to be longer than this. Like, it doesn't have to be more than this. I would just do that if that were me. But other than that, though, decent. I can't think of any kind of extra junk I would say other than, like, I would maybe have liked a more cohesive sub that was more related to the kick than this Reese thing you've got going on. Other than that, cool times. Moving on to Aukopi. Excuse me. Aukopi waiver. It's an MP3. You're named waiver. All right. Cool. So I really liked American Horror Story and the 1984 series in particular because it had a really dope soundtrack. And one of the things about it was that they just went all in on this like extreme 80s like retro style. It's retro now. Well, let's talk about retro stuff. Like when you're gonna do a retro style, you have some choices. You can either go hard and like sound like the style did in its time, which might be easy enough if you get like the stuff they use, which this pretty well sounds like you did. Either you managed to figure out how and knew how to build all of it, or you found a pack that has the stuff. Either way, it's perfect. Like, this is the exact like pack of stuff to use, right? But there's some mixing questions, because the old stuff was mixed with like unimaginable limitations, like literally limitations that I'm sure plenty of you could not imagine, because we're just so much used to like having instant solutions to a lot of these problems with things like compression timing and loudness and sidechaining and all that whatever. Because a pretty common trope nowadays for this style, because this style did mature into the kind of like modern, I keep wanting to call it electro, but that means something else. I hope you guys know what I'm talking about, because the modern versions of it have a lot of like different rules, like the kicks and snares are always loudest things, and there's not as much reverb on them and that kind of thing. But it's not really so much because it's that they don't want to have those objects, and they don't want them to feel like this. They just also want this to match with the modern sensibility. So like this example, like a lot of these sounds have a lot more low frequency in them than they necessarily need to, mostly because they just do, because low frequency stuff generally sounds good, like as a support for whatever like thing is happening. And when we high pass stuff to like remove it all, so that we can pile on a bunch of other junk or whatever, like we're not really trying to make it feel like a bunch of high-passed stuff is there. We're trying to make all of those things individually sound like they did before we high-passed them, because they are all supported evenly by the same thing, and therefore they all have the support that they had. That's the whole point of like separating subs and layering and keeping close attention to frequencies, registers, and that kind of thing. And the modern solution to like making sure the kick has room to things is the sidechain stuff. And there wasn't a lot of that in the old days. Like, there was ducking, that's been around forever, but mostly it was just letting compressors compress, and then how far they could and how well they did. And of course, whether or not whatever they were doing was going to end up in a movie or not, or if it was just going to be a track by itself, because like we talked about the previous guy, there's different considerations. Like, you're not going to mix this to be like a Madian track if you want it to be in a TV show. You're going to mix it almost like this, actually. So though, the other thing that I would come across about it is some of your music choices, like the progression got weird, but a lot of this stuff did get like this. So the retro-ness of it is, intact. And though some of those note choices, like the chords in that very first track in the low end, do translate to like muddying up the place. Also, some of your higher frequency elements are really loud relative to everything else. I'm looking at the scope up there, like seeing them evenly represented with the low stuff is part of what's making it feel top heavy. Isn't that interesting that if it is actually linearly represented, that it feels like there's more highs than lows? This comes back to the physical reality that lower frequency stuff requires more power to sound as loud as higher frequency things, and vice versa. Higher frequency things can be lower and still sound just fine, in comparison. Given it, that's what you want, because if the texture is that you want extra high frequency buzz, then by all means do that kind of thing. I'm making a lot of assumptions when I listen to these tracks, and mostly I just assume about targets, right? Because we're talking about like whether or not this is like a retro purpose or not. Because a lot of freaking awesome modern stuff, right? Like anything that's probably going to be on the Cyberpunk soundtrack, for example, like that's a lot of this stuff, but modern, with like modern heaviness and mixing paradigms and whatnot, but with the sound design and the writing, and still with some clever like not going as hard, because that's generally how you retro something. Like you mix it and work with it like you were with the old stuff, and most of the time that just means not having as many tools at your disposal, like not being perfect with your sidechaining, not being perfect with your EQ, not being perfect with loudness and levels and pitch and that kind of thing. And that's usually what people tend to want to go out their hardware when they're doing this sort of thing, because that just has all of that stuff built in as limitations. Outside of that, this was a good example of this precise kind of thing, because it did more or less sound like it came out of the intro to American Horror Stories 1984 series. And considering the point, it seemed like you did it. All right, I'm going to do one more track. I actually wanted to do two more, but I have a lesson soon, and I poorly planned my time. This one is Hellhills, the Devil's Daughter. Also an MP3. Also clipping. Here we go. Here we go.
The mist is now awake. Every drop of will it takes, I can't save you. You can't look at her face. Now you made the same mistake. I don't blame you. Watching from afar, she's a stalker. Caught from the abyss, a night walker. Mountain of corpses, she's the devil's daughter. I freeze as she emerges from the water. You were never meant to be my savior, not my remedy. I was living in ecstasy until you became a part of me. Get the fuck away from me, get the fuck away from me. Not ready and I'm not sure if I'll ever be. She doesn't let you think logically. Glitch in my own fantasy. Not a single summer problem me, I expected her the least. Heart rate increases way too much, I feel it in my knees. Go, please, slowly killing me like some fucking disease. She laxities, I asked for her name and now it all repeats. So why do I still believe that this is just a dream? I scream and it doesn't seem like me. Unique, just a piece of meat, just a piece of meat. I forget to breathe, I forget to breathe. Doesn't seem like me, 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 doesn't seem like me. Watching from afar, she's a stalker. Caught from the abyss, a night walker. Mountain of corpses, she's the devil's daughter. I freeze as she emerges from the water. Watching from afar, she's a stalker. Caught from the abyss, a night walker. Mountain of corpses, she's the devil's daughter. I freeze as she emerges from the water.
Wow, damn. Not record. Okay. So this is really cool. And vocals. How nice. And all right. So I was actually prepared for there to be some problems, noting that there was clipping and that there were vocals all at once. Like I was like, oh, this is going to be weird because normally vocals are a difficult thing to process in pretty much all circumstances. But one of the reasons why they're so difficult is because they're an awful lot like a filtered format experience. And when you distort that stuff, problems happen. I'm sure a lot of you have noticed. And in fact, a lot of people who work this sort of thing, who work also like the other louder genres of dubstep and formaty kind of growly, whatever stuff that has those genres, like that's pretty much what it's like to work with vocals, is working with that stuff and just doing a higher frequency, or if you're doing a male vocal, it's literally the same range. In fact, a lot of the things, like I used to use the male vocal range as a modulator for some stuff. And so that's how a lot of that processing works. It's pretty much just the same as just a voice. So treating them like that is good. Which is to say that a little bit of distortion goes a long way. And part of the reason why this track doesn't suffer for how much clipping there is because every single element has some element of crunch to it. Which is to say that extra crunch isn't out of place. You even hear this guy by himself.
Just way too much, I feel it in my knees.
Oh, also, I was enamored by this sound, right? Happening by itself. And look at this. Is this a clip? Is this the clip of this doing that? Or is there like a beat behind this? Really, really, really low. Either way, it's just funny to see this represented in there, but like, this is neat. It's a neat little visual phenomenon there. But the actual business, the business is good. The sidechaining is nice. The mix is like tight with it, which is cool. Which is it pretty well looks as though that the sub sidechain was pretty much just that it was sidechained to subs. And that's pretty well a pretty metal thing to do. And I guess that makes sense. The genre is a little more related to metal than I think it is to like electronic business. Given that like all the sound design, I didn't hear any guitars, but there were a lot of elements that got treated like guitars, and even the vocal range and style is pretty much like a thing that ends up in metal. So a lot of the metal like considerations end up in here, including not letting your sidechain getting the best of your beat, which is something that we do in electronic stuff and the EDM focused genres because it sounds cool rhythmically. But if our job is to be wall soundy, but we still want impact, but we still want wall soundy, then we want to be real good about like, cool, only certain frequencies are going to be mixed in with certain other frequencies. Either that or they're just on top of it. And like, which is also a kind of form of sidechaining. Like if you're doing multi-band compression and you got a big peak in your sub and then it breaks down in your sub and but only your sub, then you basically sidechain. Like that's just what happened, but it's just less in your control if you're doing it that way. The results are pretty similar though, which is that things fit. And this was an excellent mix. Still all that stuff about clipping though. Like you can get the interstable peaking under control and then just won't do that. And it'll still sound fine. It won't really change the tone of this because the tone of it is good. And yeah, good job. Hellhills. Hellhills. That makes more sense. Hellhills. Cool. All right, you guys. I hope you enjoyed these tracks. They were all really good today. I'll see you again next week. If you'd like your track to be featured, feel free to head over to the Discord channel where there is a specific submission channel for the viewer track reviews. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.